I'm going to start with a song, and I want you just for a moment just to be aware of yourself. Don't be aware of me. And just be aware of your heart and aware of your body and the simplicity of it all. Tempo makarajile, tempo makaraj. Let's see. Tempo makarajile, elvena jamura sho, ay, elvena jamura sho, tempo makarajile, elvena jamura sho, ay, elvena jamura sho, tempo makarajile, tempo makarajile, elvena jamura sho, ay, elvena jamura sho, tempo makarajile. That's a song that's sung by the Yoruba people out of Africa. And when they sing that song, they know that they're singing the vibration of time as it exists through eternity, throughout our universe and beyond. So when they sing that song, there's a shift in their physiology. There's a shift in the heart and the shift in who they are. And they, just by the simplicity of that song, connect with that vibration. And the awareness of time, the eternity of time, comes into their awareness. And I find that pretty amazing. In that culture from Yoruba, they call these different fundamental elements of the universe, they call them orishas. And they had a long time ago seers that could look into the universe and beyond, and they could see the universe being formed in these fundamental forces, and they were able to distinguish, just through their perception, over 2,800 forces. Now, we're a generation that's starting to see things, but they saw 2,800, so we still have a ways to go to be able to see how they could see. But that's what's happening with our generation as we're moving in that direction. And I just thought to talk about time for a moment and then go into what I've always been interested in, is unity consciousness. But there was a time where on the earth, people had that kind of awareness where they could see the eternity of time at all times, and they could see the details of the eternity of time. So for me, that's another level of what we need to accomplish when we accomplish unity consciousness, that we need to be able to see all of the details that make up that experience, that expression. And it's interesting that there is that Vedic tradition that had that kind of awareness of time in terms of billions and billions of years, and that human life existed on this earth for billions and billions of years. And in that time, in the Vedas, they record the time, they call them yugas. And Sat Yuga, which is the highest quality of awareness that human beings had, where they knew everything at all times. Sat Yuga existed on Earth for 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga, which came after that, where people started to lose that awareness, that existed for 1,296,000 years. And then Dwapara Yuga, which again was sort of descending into this darkness that people have been talking about tonight, that lasted for, or lasts because it's a cycle that repeats itself, 864,000 years. And then Kali Yuga, which we are part of now, is a process of 432,000 years. 432,000 years. And it's interesting because we're awakening and being aware of our awakening process, but there's so much more that we need to awaken to. And we are that generation that's starting that. And as you see from what everybody's saying tonight, there's different ways to look at it. You can't just sort of say it's one way, but the variety of it. They say that all of these 4 yugas are called Maha Yuga. 1 Maha Yuga equals 4 0.32 million years, and then 1 day of Brahma is 1,000 Mahayugas. And the age of the Earth is 4.5 billion years, and the age of the universe is 13 or close to 14 billion years. So all of that has to become open to our awareness of the details of it if we really are going to, and we will, because that's kind of the game plan of humanity, that cycle of where we progressively open our awareness to see all of that. And yet it's so interesting that today's human experience, statistics say that the average human life is between 32 and 82 years, and the oldest confirmed recorded age is 122 years. So how small is all of that from the reality of who we really are? Pardon?
Billions of years.
Right.
We're just here that much.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, what happened in my journey of coming to start to be aware of awareness and be aware of who I am, I'll just sort of talk a little bit about it, but don't be listening to me, be thinking, how does that relate to how your life has been as you've been awakening? But I grew up in Berkeley, and I was married at the time. My husband and I went off to India in 1969 to become teachers of transcendental meditation. And prior to that, we'd been meditating. We had started TM and had been meditating for about 2 years before we went to India. Now, that was back in Berkeley in the 60s, and I had no idea even what meditation was. I just kind of went along with Lou. He found this thing, let's go do it. And so we did. And it was interesting. I would go to these talks, and they were talking about consciousness, and they were talking about this. I didn't really quite grab it until one day in meditation, I realized, oh, there was something that happened. I've been thinking, and I wasn't thinking, and that was an experience also. So that was the first time I realized, oh, that space in between a thought is what they call consciousness. Oh, okay. And then, you know, they started to talk about that's yourself, that's your being, that's who you are. And if you grow in that awareness of that space that underlies those thoughts, then you're growing in that awareness of self-realization. So I finally kind of got the hang of it, and I was really fortunate at that time, and I think Lisa was addressing this, of how we're that generation that's sort of clearing the way, because I was with that organization for 20 years, and we had the opportunity for long meditation, lots of meditations. As a TM teacher, we were teaching thousands of people how to meditate, so we were really absorbed in all of that, but we did it in a group situation. There was, you know, at the courses there would be thousands of people, and the weekend workshops, we would be doing the long meditations, and then the month-long courses we would be long meditations. So we were really just diving constantly into what we call the transcendent, that transcendental field of consciousness where you're experiencing the self alone by itself. And then when, in the 70s, Maharishi had the TM teachers go off to Switzerland for these 6-month courses to meditate 8 to 10 hours a day. And I did that for 2 years. And then he would come around to the different hotels and talk about our experiences and then give us advanced techniques to be able to follow a thought back to its source and then be able to observe how the thought emerges. So I realized, you know, as I'm looking at this new generation that's being born on Earth today and how awake they are, is how really dumb I must have been, how really totally closed down that I needed all those years of meditation to finally get it. But it's interesting that in that particular tradition that Maharishi represented, which was out of India, the Vedic tradition, is they had the understanding of the growth of consciousness, and I think that is important to keep in the conversation, that there is actually a development of consciousness that takes place. That first moment where I was able to identify something that was separate from whatever I had known before, that was an experience of the self. And then as I was meditating, and the way in which we did it, we always were meditating in the morning and then in the late afternoon, and then we had the activity in between, and the activity was the integration process. And that made sense because if you're having an experience of consciousness, it's not separate from your physiology. Your physiology has to adjust in order to become more refined to reflect that experience of consciousness. So then there was that whole process of being active and yet meditating, and then being active and then meditating. And then what would start to happen is that which you were observing inside yourself as yourself separate from everything else began to be there while you were engaged in everything else. So that the activity of the day, no matter how dynamic it wasn't overshadowing that experience of consciousness. And so I think that's valuable to recognize in our lives, because like right now, you'll hear a lot of times about people awakening and they just go berserk because they don't know how to handle it. And Kundalini rising, and you hear all kinds of things out there in the environment that really didn't play that much of a role in the way in which I was introduced to it. But what's happening is people are out there having experiences and there's nobody to talk to, and they're not quite sure what's happening, and am I crazy? Is this real? What's happening? So that's part of what's valuable with what Dawn has created here with Wesak, is you all come with your own experiences. You're hearing many, many people talking, and they're all talking different aspects, and you can say, oh yes, I understand that, I have that experience, or oh, that's interesting, I'd be interested to have that experience. So you're in a safe environment here, and definitely take the time to talk with the teachers or the people that are giving the, I guess, do you call them workshops or talks or meetings or whatever? But all the things that we're doing is, you know, just really make good use of this time to explore who you are and how you want to fit into all of this that's being offered. It's valuable. And then in the process of that development of consciousness, where you're beginning to be out here and you see all of these things and it doesn't overshadow consciousness, well then there's still another level of development where when you're looking at all the differences out here, all of a sudden, and this was the one sentence, it took me years to really understand this sentence because I had to finally understand it experientially, and that is the coexistence of opposite values. They're both the same. So you can be looking at a person and you're also looking at consciousness. And so you can intellectualize it and you can say you understand it, but there comes a point where it becomes your own reality, your own experience. And so I think that's you know, part of the discussion of unity consciousness, but you can see how everybody's starting to address it from different ways, and it's so important in that way. And then my mother became sick. I grew up in Berkeley, as I'd said, and so I came back to Berkeley. And while I was with her, I started to, with friends that I had in the area and stuff, they were interested in something that was going on out of Brazil. And I thought, okay, let's go see what that's about. So it was a group up in Sebastopol. We went, and this woman from Brazil came, and she was teaching people how to be mediums. Now, this was totally different from what I had done with TM, and it would have been sort of looked at as, you know, be careful, you know, that's not a thing to be doing. What happened, and it's just how, you know, we're all scientists in the lab exploring and experiencing new realities. But she took this group out to the beach, and so my friend and I went out there, and they had these drums, and they were all dressed in white, and it was very exciting. And this woman, she brought in what was called her marinero, the spirit guide that works with people's emotions at the ocean, and that's why we were at the ocean. And she was standing, say, like up here. She had incorporated, that was the word they used, she had incorporated this marinero who was going to help the people of that temple in Sebastopol in their mediunic development as mediums. So they were all standing in a line, and then they would go up to her, and she would tap them on the, not she, but the marinero would tap them on the forehead, and bingo, their marinero came in and they stepped outside. I thought, wow, this is interesting. So my friend said, well, why don't we get in line and do it too? So we got in line, and and it's like you're waiting, and you're watching all the people, and they know what they're doing, and they're becoming mediums and bingo, and it happens just like that. And then the line's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And then all of a sudden, there I am, and it's like I'm totally doubtful, nothing's going to happen to me. I don't even know what they're doing. And the marinero taps me like this, and I go through the air, and I land on the sand, and I experience this huge amount of light, and it's not my light, and yet it's activating my light, and it's laughing and laughing and laughing, and I start laughing and laughing, and it's not me laughing. Wait, what's happening here? Like this. Well, my friend told me later that I went through the air 6 feet. I had no idea. So something happened, and I was fascinated. What is this? It's so different from what I had known as meditating with consciousness, and it's quiet, and you're closed your eyes, and all of a sudden this is something different, but it felt good. It felt like, yeah, let's see what this is about. So I went to Brazil every year for 12 years, and they teach very much like you would see with the Native Americans. You don't go down and they say, okay, here's this, and this is what you're going to learn today, and you just kind of have to hang out, and then things happen, and you start to become a medium. You don't even know how it happens, but it does over a period of time. And there's two beings that I work with today that I will be bringing in tomorrow evening and the Sunday evening as well. And the first one is Vovo Anamalia, and she's really wonderful. People really like her. Vovo means grandmother in the Yoruba language, or even maybe it's even in the Portuguese language. That was another thing. I didn't speak Portuguese, so I know I missed out on a lot of the knowledge. But you just watch, and you, through absorption, that's kind of the indigenous way, you begin to acquire that knowledge. But she works with these forces that of the universe, and it's really interesting. I'll have out there at the vendor booth, I have the drawings of the different forces as they exist out in the universe. Hiawatha showed them to me, and I drew them. They're in sort of two-dimensional, but I saw them in multi-dimensional. But it's interesting, down in Brazil, they work with the fire, then the earth, and then the water, and then the air. Well, she's reversed it, because she says, I'm now outside the universe, and I'm looking at how the universe was created. So she's starting with the light and with the wisdom rather than with the darkness. And it's interesting because I'm kind of controversial down in Brazil because I'm not doing it the way they do it. But that's this thing about what's happening today. We're another generation kind of looking at these different traditions and saying, wait a minute, we're starting to look at it in a new way. So she'll work with these forces that are found also in you, but she'll show you how to see it from out there in the universe as the universe created it. And in her tradition, they don't use the intellect. They use the heart and they use the body. So it's with dance and with song and with drumming. So I don't have the drummers, but I have the music that she likes that's very authentic to that. And so she'll come in. She's very sweet. Richard will be there to help her and bring her in and everything. And then she will be giving the workshop. I will have checked out. And generally what happens for me is I'm kind of like above the earth looking down, watching it all happen like that. Then what will happen on Sunday is Hiawatha. Now this is interesting. This speaks to the value of Mount Shasta. Down in Brazil, when you're taught to be a medium, they come in and you work with people's difficulties in their daily lives. And so I was game for all of that, and I was living in Marin at the time, and I did all of that. But then when I moved to Mount Shasta, Hiawatha started to change, and he started to develop a meditation where he showed people how to go into the universe and how to look around and see the universe different from when we're down here on Earth, we're looking up this way at the universe rather than looking around at the universe or looking down at the Earth. And then slowly he started to show people how to expand their awareness beyond the size of our universe and free from all the boundaries of the Earth and our galaxy and our universe, and taking people back to original source at that level. So you first expand the awareness, then experience the merging with the absolute or the unmanifest or God or creator, whatever you want to call it. It's a very profound experience. And then in the meditation, he'll show you how to remember where that moment was where you first emerged from the absolute, where you first emerged from that source. And then how it was when you first came to the universe, because you were a presence that was larger than the environment of the universe. Because the universe, from the way he talks about it, is a presence just like all of us are presences. We somehow ended up on Earth. I don't know, when you start to think of it from out there, it's like, why did we ever decide to come to Earth? This is crazy. You know, we're only here for 100 years and we go through all this suffering and pain. It's just, what's all that about? So he gives another way to look at it, and it's a very deep and profound meditation, so that's what will happen at that time. One thing just to say last about that meditation of Hiawatha's is, once I started to be aware of what he was really doing, and again I must be really dense, because he's been doing that now for 8 years, and now I'm just sort of like, I get what he's doing. But the significance of what I think it is today when people talk about, in meditation, having that non-dual experience of the absolute, they're sitting in their chair like this, they're still in 3D. So even though you can open your awareness like that to infinity, you're still bound by this. You're still bound by the environment of the universe. Whereas when you expand your awareness beyond the universe, then go back to that absolute field, that unmanifest field of life, it really is a whole different scenario. And I think that's going to be the significance of what Hiawatha has to offer us, is when people begin to be aware that, you know, even though they're experiencing the infinity of time, even though they're experiencing unboundedness of consciousness, there's different ways to experience that unboundedness by first experiencing the expansion of your awareness rather than just going through the thought form and then the thought disappears and there's consciousness. So I hope you have a chance to come to both events, and I want to get your feedback also to see afterwards what you think of it. Thanks.